So I'd like to reflect ultimately, at least within today's time of reflection, about the discrepancy of these two texts, or the tone, or what appears to have been a ramped up tone that Jesus has building in Luke's gospel throughout the chapter 12 that we've been reading in. But I want to step back from that for a moment and think differently. I'm going to tell you the tale of two committee meetings. I went to this happened realistically recently, but generically this happens to us all the time. I went to the first committee meeting in which folk gathered, and we talked about the stated items of business, the things we always talk about when we finally get around to meeting. And then we talked about some new ideas, some things that might be fun to do, or that we should do because it would be a better diligent practice of the work that committee was in. And there was nodding of heads, and then there was the fateful, let's talk about that in September. You've been in that committee, right? Where every task needs another meeting to think a little bit longer about it until another meeting strings into perpetuity to never getting any of those new ideas done. The other meeting happened, another group, very similar task. And in the process of the meeting, someone brought up, there's a question we're not asking. And everyone kind of said, oh, you're right. And then there was the allowance, well, maybe we need to stop and think about that some more. But the committee members were like, no, we can figure this out. And they start thinking and breaking down a whole new way in which we could do work that's been done a different way the whole time. And by the end of the meeting, and this was a budget meeting, everyone's like, this was really awesome. And we unrolled and proposed new and exciting things, and we came away from a budget meeting inspired. I know that's rare. But have you been in those kind of meetings that get an energy of their own when an idea off the wall promotes conversation that creates real change? I was thinking about these two meetings because I was in them in the same week, because they had very similar leadership, because they had very similar backgrounds of the people in it, and very similar tasks in front of them. What makes one group paralyzed by possibility, and what makes another explore and be willing to fail boldly? And then I flipped over, then I changed, my journey went off in a different way. I went to different things, it was a curiosity, but I didn't really think more of it. And then I started reading, reminding myself what this week's sermon was about. And Jesus, age old, do not worry, even the lilies and the ravens are seen to, so you shouldn't worry at all. And I don't know if you've ever read that text and thought to yourself, yeah, but we have a little bit different order of life in front of us than the lilies in the soil with the sun and the rain. And maybe if you were, for instance, the grass growing in my yard, you would say some lilies have things to worry about. Which gets to the rub of this do not worry claim. Because the worry isn't so much the problem, it's a symptom of the problem. Another problem often the Bible wants to discuss is fear. Fear sits in tandem with worry, right? We're worried about that which we fear. We're worried about that which is uncertain. We're worried about that which has outcomes in which we are not fully in control of. The Bible tells us over and over again, do not fear. In fact, almost every angel says, do not fear, because the natural reaction to an individual who finds themselves caught up in a story whose discernment and actions are way bigger than their pay grade is to be worried, to be fearful. The opposite of that action is to trust. To trust that God is in this story. To trust that you have been given the skills and the attributes to do bold work. To trust the community of faith or the structures that we find ourselves in. To be willing to dare hope and risk failure. Worry comes up most when we do not trust any of that. When life has taught us and burned us to imagine a more skeptical and jaded worldview in which hopeful newness is not a possibility, but it is, as Bruce sat here a few weeks ago and preached about, a vanity. The vanity of vanities, because nothing is new under the sun. The committee that can respond to new suggestion with immediate action doesn't have more able people. It has people who trust each other more. And trust that the failure that might result from something new won't be the end of all things. The group who is, at least in language and maybe even in conscious mindset, positively disposed to each other, but doesn't trust the possibility of any new results, will forever wring hands and stall ourselves out. How better to navigate the known than to risk what we do not know. I can trust this system to be what this system has always been. But that, I don't know. Isn't this what happens to the Israelites in the wilderness, right? When they find themselves looking backwards, as we have also talked about in the Hebrews text recently, they find themselves looking backwards saying, oh, how much better it was when we were slaves in Egypt. We knew the systems, we knew the rules, we knew the outcomes. Whether it was good for us, we knew and trusted we would at least eat something. Which is why they called manna, what is it? They weren't even sure it was something. The seeds of worry and fear the Bible speaks against so often are really a byproduct of the question, do we really trust God? Do we really trust ourselves? And do we really trust each other? I think this is part of our radical call to authenticity. We discover, for instance, that if the pastor forgets to do the assurance of pardon, you're still pardoned, right? And grace still abounds. We discover that if the father voluntold his son that he has to do music in worship and picks the piece of music, he will accidentally pick one where the piano part is really hard in support of the fairly easy saxophone part. Okay, I'm talking about myself right here. Warren came to me yesterday and he said, I feel really bad for Ryan because a lot of people after church are going to say what a great job I did, and the saxophone part here is really easy and the piano part is all over the place. But when we trust each other enough, we can become the foundation each other thrives upon. We can put each other in a place to succeed even if we fail, which is why I always remind, whether it's Warren or Ryan, no one else is looking at the music to know what notes you played or didn't. And sometimes our mistakes are more beautiful than our successes. But if we don't trust that, we do not believe that. And we spend our night wrestling with all the angels about all the possibilities. Have any of you done a high ropes course? Do you know what a high ropes course is? Okay, wow. Okay, raise your hands high. Do you know what a high ropes course is? Have you done one? All right, so high ropes course, wait for it. They're ropes and they're high. Okay, so you've probably seen one on the side of a road. This is sort of the extreme outgrowth of trust exercises. Have you done the 8 of you put your hands like this and someone falls off a beam, right? Somewhere, somewhen, some corporate director made you do this, right? On a corporate retreat or in a youth group activity or on a team. And so the high ropes course, the big is the more extreme version. You put telephone poles up. You're somewhere between 20 and 40 feet up. There's cabling that connects these probably 40 or 50 feet. Some of them get creative, and there's different ways. There might be ropes you have to extend to reach, or there might be a side one while you're just getting, or they get really creative. But on all of them, 5 feet above you is another cable you've clipped into with a carabiner to a safety harness, right? So, the best way to enjoy a high ropes course, in my opinion? It's to fall right away. It's to, before you try to take a single step, just jump over the side. And why is that going to create a more enjoyable experience? I'm not hearing it. What? Trust. Well, you saw where this was going, didn't you? It was a little predictable. You don't fall 40 feet, do you? You jump off the side, and the carabiner holds onto the cable, which holds onto your safety strap, and boom, then you're just floating in air. It feels almost like being back in your mother's womb, supported and encased in the security that you need without having to do any work or having to earn it. You're just strapped in, and now you can say, oh, so falling isn't a problem. And once you learn that falling isn't a problem, it's a lot easier to step on all the weird obstacles they give you to pass over. This summer, my kids were super, super excited because we were staying at my sister's house, and they learned that Six Flags Great America, a big amusement park, is 2 minutes away. And they convinced us we had to go. And I love roller coasters this much because I am a little bit of a control freak. And roller coasters are about not having any. They are about trusting that, for me, they're about trusting that the engineers who made this ride knew what they were doing. But this is how I go through a roller coaster. I'm bracing myself so that when the seat breaks, I'll somehow superhumanly be able to hold on in 5G turns upside down, right? This is me. Is it over? And you know how fun that is? It's not fun at all. But when you release control, when you trust that the machine knows what it's doing, and I Googled in line how many fatalities a year happen on roller coasters, right? And it's 1 in 750 million, the safest way we can transport ourselves in the world. But I'm still not convinced of that. So I'm still, But if you're hands in the air, free flying, looking around, seeing what's happened, it's a great release, and for some people, really exciting. Some people. And others who are dads are just surviving the day until somewhere around 7 o'clock at night we say, okay, I think I've earned the right not to go on this one. You all have fun. But it's not disconnected from the tale of two committees, right? Our ability to release control, to trust in ourselves, to trust that God is in this, to trust each other, and that the community is the safety harness that will catch you when you fall, is what makes the difference between one more meeting and no, we can do this right here and now. And it's part of the dilemma, I imagine, that Jesus has in this text, right? Because sometimes we like to think Jesus is just, theologically we claim, so, don't hold me on heresy trials here, that Jesus is perfect, and Jesus is perfect at everything. Because Jesus is God, and God never makes mistakes like flooding the earth. Or Jesus never uses a metaphor that involves cutting people in two and discarding them. Sorry, you can get rid of that part of the text. But I think what's happening is Jesus is getting ramped up in his ministry, and Jesus is the Son the Master has sent to the people who have always beaten up and sent the prophets home, if they let them live at all. And so Jesus is ramped up. If you notice this in the Gospels, if you start to sit and walk through a gospel all in one sitting or in regular diligence, you start to realize Jesus is at Jesus' most impatient when he's talking to his disciples or the Pharisees. The religious leaders he expects to know and do better. Right? You heard that in the text. Those who know what is expected, they're the ones who most frustrate me. The ones who know nothing, all grace, all patience, all love. And Jesus finds himself surrounded by his disciples who mean well but struggle to trust. Can't we have one more meeting, Jesus? Can't we have one more year of following you, Jesus? Can't you not die, Jesus? Can't you? Read it. It's kind of amazing Jesus hangs with them at all. One of my favorite moments happens in the Gospel of Mark. They're out in a boat, and the Pharisees have been testing Jesus. And this is right after the feeding of the 5,000. And so feeding the 5,000, testing, they're out in a boat. And Jesus, who I think is reflecting on the Pharisees, says, beware the yeast of the Pharisees. And you know what his disciples say? He's mad because we forgot bread again. No! Beware those who tell you it always takes another meeting to do something different. Beware those who don't trust that failure will be okay and therefore do nothing that hasn't already been done and didn't work. Do not worry, which feels inaccessible because we all worry. But trust that you won't worry alone. Trust that we can imagine another way forward together. And if it doesn't work, it won't be the end. It'll just be the moment we have to very awkwardly get back up on the wire and try again. And trust that when that happens, you won't get back up alone. But Jesus, to Peter, flailing in the water, unable to walk on it, will reach down and pull you back up into the boat. There is so much potential in the world for a kinder, gentler world. But none of it will happen if we stay in this room worried that we won't survive today because there's less and less of us, rather than imagining that there's bold and exciting things to be done out in the world, even if all we do is fail dramatically in love together. I could take that because I'd be doing it with you. This is the word of our Lord.